Okay, so let's get warmed up. Let's find a comfy spot with our feet together and our hands atop our heads. And then hip circles. Waking up by gently rolling around your base, hitting each part of the foot. As your body's loosened and your coordination comes in, you can increase the size of that circle. Morning, Craig. Good. As they're being pulled from the belt. 2 more. Excellent. And then the other direction, warming up slow. Gradually increasing the size of that hip circle. Two more. Good. Returning to the middle. Stepping out to the side. Belly drawn to the back, the hands and the hips, keeping that back straight. As the hips roll back, the chest comes forward. Hips forward, chest comes up. Good. Moving from that waist, back straight. For more of a challenge, bring the hands to the center of the chest. Morning, Karen.
Morning.
More challenge still, hands behind the ears. Two more. Good. Hands in the hips, the legs in the same position. Rolling the hips back as we sink, as we raise up. The hip comes forward and the shoulder goes back. Twisting as we look at the ceiling. And then rolling back down to our base. Lift, hip comes forward, shoulder back. Twist. And then down. Roll, twist. Good. Taking your time feeling that roll through your base. 4 more. 1, 2, 3. Last one. 4. Good. Narrowing that base a little bit. Pushing into the ground, drawing the belly to the spine. Back straight as we sink. Pushing the hips forward as we lift to back. And continue. And pushing through your legs the whole time, stabilizing your knee as you sink, stabilizing as you raise. Two more. Last one. Good. Opening the stance a bit. Back straight, if you can manage, back straight and parallel with the ground. Turn, twist. Nice and slow, looking past your heel. Back around, stretch, twist. Look past your heel, stretch for just a moment. And then back, side to side. 3. 4. 5. Leo. Chi. Ba. Jiao. Last one. Sure. Good. Narrowing that stance a little. He loves that word, doesn't he? So cute. All right. Feet a bit beyond shoulder width and rolling around that base. Take your time. Once again, hitting each part of the foot as you roll. Once this roll feels comfortable, you can start adding in the body drop. Make sure you're still coming all the way around your feet. Two more. Last one. Good. A more vertical position. Roll the other direction. Take your time. Hit each part of the foot. Bring your waist all the way around your base. Side, back, side to forward. Keeping a slight bend in both your knees at all times. Once you feel comfortable, you can add in the roll. Two more. Last one. Good. Shaking it out. The hands on top of the knees. Roll in knee circles. Good. Once again, rolling all the way around that base. Change directions. Good. Back to the middle. Forward, open, and back. Back to the middle. Back, around, and forward. One more. Good. Shake it out a little bit. Okay, we're going to do our leg lift, stepping to the side next. Remember, we want a nice wide step. That way we can use the pull into that base to raise the heel up. Okay? Let's go for 20 side to side. 1, 2. Good. Two more. Good. Shaking that out. Now watching me, from our twist to the side, we're going to use that counter twist with the upper body to feel a stretch traveling down our torso, all the way into our heels, raising the foot up. It's really important to keep that umbilicus drawn to the spine. Otherwise, this twist kind of maxes out as the hip rolls back here. If I draw the belly into the back, that twist pulls my hip forward, connects into that inguinal, into that quad, and the power transfers all the way into the foot. So try a couple of these nice and slow. If you're struggling with the form of it, you can raise your stance up a little. Feel that stretch. Feel it pull the heel out and draw back. Good, try a couple of those in your own. Very nice, Craig. Okay, everyone watching me for a quick second. One of the first things we want to avoid is drawing too far forward or too far up as we kick. I use this twist to the right with my hands, to the left with my body to create an axis that drops straight down. I'm spinning around that axis. Because my axis is here, I don't need to lean to achieve balance. I just twist around that base. The foot comes up and draws right back. See how my chest barely moves forward, my head barely bobs at all, okay? Feel that axis, pivot around that axis. There you go, Chris. Good, Joanna. Much better, both Karen and Carol. There, very nice, very nice. Find that twist, pivot around that twist point. Let's do 5 more going that way. 1、2、3、4、5. Changing sides. Now again, at your own pace, play with this movement. Play with that connection through your torso, into your hip, into your heel. Play with what it takes to pull that heel up with this twist so you don't need to lean to dislodge that foot. Try a few nice and slow at your own pace. Very nice, Craig. Good, Joanna. Very good, Karen and Chris. Very nice, Carol. Good. 2 more on your own, they'll do 5 together. And 5 with me. 1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10. Good. Shake it up. We're going to do our first set of squat kicks. Lifting the toe, pushing through the heel as we press into the ground with that base leg. We're going to raise into sink. As I raise up, I use this raise to lift the, I'm sorry, Kat. Sorry, Sophie. To raise the foot and then sink back into my stance, okay? Let's go for 10 without kicking the calf. And 1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9. Last one, sure. Good. Taking your foot back. We're going to raise the foot up, pushing down with the other leg, watching from side view. Press to lift. You do 5 each side. 1、2、3、4、5. Change sides. 1、2、3、4、5. Good. And everyone knows how I'm changing my arms? That switch creates that same kind of twist I'm utilizing here. That twist in my upper and my lower helps me to stabilize my leg as it raises up, and then place it back down where I want it, okay? Try 2 more lifts each leg with that twist. Good, Joanna. Good, Craig. Excellent. 1 and 2. Good. Success. All right. The ravenous horde is now fed. So, watching me punch. 1, 2, 3. So again, 1, turn the hips. 2, pushing into that base leg. 3. 1, 2, 3. Notice how my foot is bent, covering my knee. Slight concavity in my chest. As I step, I punch as I sink. I use that sink to power my fist. I turn my hips. I use that turn to push the hand out. I raise, pulling, use that turn to push the hand out. Good. Chamber, the opposite hand is palm up, right at the lower border of the ribs. Okay? As I step out, sinking and punching in the same time. Turning and punching in the same time. Raising and punching, same time. Good. Step, press. From the belly, press. From the belly, press. Good. And watch me for 1. As I step and sink, from my stomach, the pressure comes into my stomach, and there's that fa li. From the hip rolling through the belly, there's that fa li. From the raise and that twist, there's that fa li. And that fa li is that point where all of that movement condenses and becomes apparent in one swift motion. Okay, so it's an acceleration to that point. If that's kind of a big step for you, just stick to that slow timing with the move. If you want to add in breath, you can add in that little bit of sharpness right now, okay? So again, from the raise, step, sinking, rolling into the stomach, pop. Rolling through the hips, pop. Raising up, pop. Good. Step, E, R, San, E, R, San, E. Breathing out as you punch. R, San, E, R, San. Two more. E, R, San. Last one. E, R, San. Good, and watch me for a quick moment. So as I transition from that first punch into the second, notice how everything's moving. I'm not twisting and then throwing the hand. I'm pulling everything through. And as my hips twist, that twist rolls up through my torso and then comes out for the hand. So it's not twist, punch. It's from that belly, roll. Can we see a difference in the form of that punch? Yeah? Let's try 4 more of those, 2 more each side. Okay? Try to find that roll and acceleration. And again. E, R, San. 3 more. E, R, San. 2 more. E, R, San. Last one. Stepping, punching as you sink. E, R, San. Good, shake it out for a second. Any questions so far? Is that timing making some sense?
I was just curious about the.
Hold on a second, Karen.
Okay.
Perfect. Joey. Thank you so much. You as well. Take care. Stay safe. Sorry, what was that, Karen?
I was just curious about the angle of the punch for this one.
The second one.
I think it's variable.
Well, the first one, I'll do side body, then I'll face you again. Crossing my center line, as I turn, I'm punching off the hip, so as the hip rolls, that punch is traveling the exact same place, okay?
Okay.
So I'm punching towards my sternum, right in the center of my chest. I'm punching to where that sternum was as I twist. Punching to the center again. Center, twist, and see how as the hip rolls, the arm is throwing off the hip. The hip's punching. The roll is accelerating through my torso until it reaches the hand.
Okay, so you're just correcting with the angle of the quad, and then
Right.
I mean, there'd be a certain range in which you're the most powerful, so orient yourself to do it that way.
And again, the range is that same target for those first 2 strikes. 1, and see here the elbow's on my side as I continue to turn. I'm not throwing with my shoulder, I'm pushing off the hip. Like the hip is rolling a ball, but the ball just keeps on accelerating. See, I draw to the middle, pop, draw to the middle, I come 50-50, roll, pop. Coil, if you watch the side view, see there's a lot of coil, pop, coil, pop, coil. Notice how my shoulders are dropped the whole time. And see how relaxed my arm is. My arm is whipping out, like it's being whipped off of the hip. Does everyone see that? As opposed to crushing and pushing. Remember, there are 3 kinds of power in Pao Chui. Who remembers what they are?
Crushing, tearing, dragging.
Crushing, good. Whipping and tearing. Very nice. Very nice. Good, let's do our next round of kicks. Was there any other questions? Okay. Outside crescent, so before we kick, pulling the foot across, pulling to the outside. Pulling across, pull to the outside. Good. Pushing into the ground with that base leg as you pull to the outside. Push into the ground, pull to the outside. Very nice. From there, start playing the stretching down the back with the kicking leg, opening up that hip. Good. Cross, stretch down the back, kick. Cross, stretch down the back. Good. Excellent. 2 more of those. Wow, all of your flexibility is improving. That's really cool to see. Very nifty. Let's do 10 of these with our squat, okay? And E, R, San, Si, Wu, Liu, Qi, Ba, Jiu, Sure. Very nice. Shake that out for a second. We're going to step in front of our foot. As my heel presses, I raise that back leg. Step, heel presses, raise. Do 10 of those. And E. Step. R. Step. San. Si. Wu. Liu. Qi. Ba.
Nice, Fritz.
Jiu. Sure. Good job, Ninja Fritz. Good job. All right. The first 2 of our triple splitting movement. Watch me remember. Coiling in, check, to cut. Coil, check, to cut. If I borrow Fritz, she punches in with 1 hand and holds the hand. First movement, check. Second movement, slicing through. Thank you. All right. So with me, the hip turns in, the hip pulls the hand. The hip draws out, the hand follows, the toes and the fingertips traveling in the same direction. Draw in, step out. Draw in, step out. Good. Watch my hip. It's 1 big circle. Rounds in, rounds out. Rounds in, rounds out. The hip turns in, hip turns out. Hip turns in, hip turns out. Good. Following this external rotation is the arm. Roll to P. Roll to split. Good. Roll to split. 1 more this side. And other side. Hip first. The hip turns in. Hip turns out. Hip turns in. Hip turns out. 2 more with just the hip. And now stack an arm on top of it. Hip pulls the arm. Hip pulls the arm. Good. Roll to step. Roll to step. 2 more. Roll to step. Roll to step. Let me watch all of you do just a couple. Good, Chris. Good, Karen. Good, Craig. Carol, a bit heavier in the wrist. There you go. But the hand has weight. We don't want to bend at the elbow. That's going to sacrifice the weight of the arm. We want a weighted arm rolling in, weighted arm reaching out. There you go. Watch me. Like you're a 4th grader making an invincibility shield, right? Roll to step. There you go. Roll to step. Good. Very nice. And for Joanna, as I turn in, so my little finger turns and leads in. Little finger leads out. Hand rolls, hip rolls. Hand rolls, hip rolls. It's actually the shoulder and the hip, but it's easier to see and feel if you start thinking about it from the hand. Turning in, stepping out. Very nice. 2 more for Joanna. Awesome. Good, Karen. Good. Fingers touching. Very nice. Very nice. So now for part 2, we have, I'll start going this way, then I'll face towards the camera. I roll in, I check. And now the weight of this structure rolling down pulls the other arm up and over. And so from here, the next hip wants to turn in. As it turns, I feel that closing of my hips. That step draws me across as the hand follows. Facing all of you. Here's my opening step. There's my closing step. I roll in. There's my opening step. There's my closing step. My weight is back the whole time. Weight back, weight back, weight back, weight back. Give that a couple of tries. Okay, one more try, and everyone watch me. So with the feet to 50-50, I'm going to turn the hip in. So we have our external rotating base. Actually, I'll get this for a second. Find that figure 8. There you go. Spend a few seconds getting comfy with this movement. Rolling one foot to the next. When you're ready, just kind of gently draw in with our basic postural elements, the foot grab, belly draw, clavicle knit, and head neck raise at your own pace. Good. Just take a second to get in your bodies. Awesome. We're going to do these first 2 movements from this stance. We're going to omit the feet for a second, then bring the feet back in once they have a good base to rest upon. So as I turn my hip in, that's the roll of the hand. So the hip turns out, and as the other hip turns out, there's that slice. Notice how I'm back weighted relative to that second movement. External rotation again. For the same side twice and do the other side twice. And so I'm going to start with what will be all of your right side. As that right side turns in, the hand turns with, the hip leads, and now as your left side begins to turn out, it pulls the other arm over, resting into place. Good. Back to our figure 8. Find that figure 8, relax. Good, we're going to go on 3, 1, 2, and now on 3, the hip holds the hand, the hip rolls, leading the hand, and as the other hip comes into play, counter-rolling, it draws the hand over, and then the hand and that hip switch. Good. Externally rotating, going on 3, 1, 2, and now for 3, hip leads the arm, hip leads the arm, right hip leads the right arm as it comes over, and see how I'm corkscrewing, I'm drilling into that foot, and the hand is following the line of that corkscrew. You see that's following that inclined plane as I sink. Good. Other side, we're moving back and forth 2 and 2 just a couple more times through. Externally rotating, we're going to start off on all of your right hip this time. On 3, 1, 2, and slowing down for 3, the hip rolls in, carrying the arm. The hip guides the arm over. As your left hip begins to roll and take power, it draws that left hand up and over, drilling into your back leg as the hand draws down. Still space in each armpit. Externally rotating. Same side. On 3, 1, 2, and now for 3, slowing down, the arm turns, the hip leads, the left hip starts drawing, drilling into that left side as the hand comes over to slice. Good, and now left side lead. We're going to do 2 more, then I'm going to watch all of you and give somebody else some advice. Externally rotating on 3, 1, 2, and now on 3, the hip rolls the arm. The hip leads, pushing the arm through. That back right hip drills, funk, carrying us through for that cut. And again, externally rotating. And on 3, 1, 2, and now for 3, that turn in pulls the arm. The turn out guides the arm. That back right hip takes over, turning and drilling, funk, for that slice. Everyone watch me for just a second. The exact same thing happens on that line, right? I turn in, external rotation. I follow that external rotation and it pulls that other hip in, boom, and then it's gonna externally rotate as I go into 3. So still roll to roll. Does everyone see that? All right, so let's try a couple more each side of the feet to 50-50. Get that timing feeling really good with that hip roll, playing with that hip roll, guiding the hand, okay? The hip roll, guiding the hand, comfortable in that base. That base is now a springy acceleration tool, not a cumbersome thing to carry along, all right? If you get lost, slow it down, right? Watch as I go slow. There's another problem in playing that little bit of lead from the hip, a little bit of lead from the other hip. Slow is a great tool here, right? Your own pace, give it a try. Good, that's the idea, Karen. That's the idea. So as I turn in, the hip turns in, pulling the arm. The hip turns out, pushing the arm. And then if you watch my hips, if I forget the arm for a second, this is what's gonna have to happen next, right? So from here, now that back hip, your right hip takes over and pulls, and that's what draws the other hand through. And so as lead hip draws in, lead hip pushes out, back hip twists, and that's the cut, okay? Good, everyone. Okay. Any questions before we do our next kicking set? And then after that, we're going to finish up the 3 slices with our 3rd slice. So far, we have but 2 slices. I know, right? We're mathematically off. Yes.
For this one, I keep finding my, I guess my base leg. It's like, I feel a little like forward leaning. And my foot is, I'm finding that it's like, to keep my heel down, I'm having to like turn it way more.
Your back leg, you mean?
This one, the one that I'm drilling into.
Okay, so watch me, Kara. See how now the weight's traveling behind my hips. So again, I'm here. Hips pushing the hand out. As the hip draws the hand back in, the weight travels behind my body just a little, and that creates the twist. And from there, I press and twist into the ground as my hand comes over. Rolling, pulling into that back hip, and then the twist comes from the hip and is carried into the ankle and also through the shoulder. You see that? Dropping on the similar plane to that outstretched front leg. Good. Does that help, Kara?
Yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, it feels like the back, the leg that I'm drilling into, like the knee is either too bent or like the foot has to turn too much. I don't know, maybe you want to like see what my feet are doing here.
See how my feet are 50-50 the whole way through.
Yeah.
And as the hip turns in, I'm pushing into the ground, twisting in the ankle, drilling through the hip, not leading with my knee, of course, kind of using this whole track as a spring as I drill and the hand comes through. Let me see, Carol. So Carol, we want to keep your feet parallel the whole time. That's the first thing. There you go. And that creates a lot of the pull that we're going to use as I turn through. So your feet are still turned out. There you go. Good. And so that's still a little turned out. The more you get to parallel, I think the easier that's going to become. So
I'm used to when we're like shifting our stance really quick.
Right. And some things are in a shifting stance, some are in that stable stance. They both teach slightly different lessons. Cool. So our next kick, last of our 3 squat kicks, are inside crescent. Before we get to our squat, let's try standing a few times. Remember, the goal here is to stabilize that grounding leg and build support through the knee, which we do by grabbing the ground, pushing into the ground, carrying the foot across, holding for a half breath, and then back to the side. Lift, wipe off the table, twist and hold, and back. Wipe off the table, and back. Watch my hands for a second. If my arms turn this way, my leg goes that way. A center pull is established. and then back to the center. My arms go this way, my leg goes that way, and back to the center. My hands are here, hand switch, step. Hand switch, step. Hand switch as I kick, step. Good, try a few more of those on your own. Switch, step, switch, step. Good, just a couple more. Good, straight leg as you hold, stabilizing, and then set the foot down. Very nice. Good, if you're working on building knee stability, this is my favorite movements. Nice and gentle, don't twist any further than is comfortable. But as you get stronger and stronger, you'll twist deeper and deeper into the kick. It'll go from here to there, all the way to the side, and not very much time at all. Let's do 10 with the squat, and E, R, San, Si, Wu, Liu, Qi, Ba, Jiu, Shi. Excellent. Now for the last of those slices, watching me, hip turns in, hip turns out. The second hip is turning in. The first part of its external rotation, that carries the hand in, and then as the hip rolls to turn out, it draws the arm out and through, okay? Again, I roll, check, the hip turns in, slice, the hip rolls out to lift. 1, 2, 3. All right, now watch me again for a second. For our base of standing still, the hip leads. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Just go side to side first, then bring it to a straight line in just a second. So again, rolling. 1, the hip turns in. 2, this hip rolls out. There's our turn to lift. Good. Again, together, turning in. 1, 2, and now as that right hip for all of you turns out, I pull into that left hip a little, and there's that throw. Good. Rolling in. 1, 2, 3. Good. One more this side, and I'll try the other side. Rolling in. 1, 2, 3. Good. Figure eights. Changing sides. So now that right side is going to roll in. 1, 2, 3. Good. That right side rolls in again. 1, 2, 3. Watch my hips. The whole circuit is 1, 2, 3. Just a basic external roll into external roll. That's the entirety of the base here. Now watch out with the hands. You can see that front hip turns in to out. Back hip turns in to out. Roll to roll. Okay? Let's do twice more together. I'll be play with it. The hip rolls in, pulling the hand. The hip rolls out, leading the hand. The back hip draws the back hand over. The back hip externally rotates, pulling into that new hip. And there's that raise. Good. And again with me. The hip turns in. Hip turns out. Back hip turns in. Back hip turns out. Once more with me, let all of you play with it. Hip in. Hip out. Back hip in. Back hip out. Good. Play with that for a second. Very close, Chris. So Chris, watching me. You're great to hear. Have that side view. Let that hip roll. So see, it's turned in. You want it to roll out, and the hands being pushed off of that roll. There you go. Yeah. So let it roll all the way through your stomach as you switch from side to side. Good, good. Your first movement will also be short change the initiation of the second just there. Much better. Watch one more time, Chris. 1, 2 is looking great. Take your time. Let that hip turn in. See, let that hip turn in, and as it rolls out, let it carry the arm. That's it. The hip is still leading the hand, not the other way around, right? Just like in the very beginning, the hip leads the hand. The hip leads the hand. The hip turning in leads the hand. The hip turning out leads the hand. There's the timing. Good. Keep playing with that, Chris. Very nice. Anxious moment here. But again, the reason we move like this, right? The reason we have these big arm moves is because in sparring, if we're aiming for little shots and it's a serious fight, especially like a bare knuckle fight, I can't really afford to miss the thing coming at me. It's going to cause serious damage, right? So if I push in fast, even if I have a primary and a secondary defense, I might miss and it might slip through. And so the people who I work with in Beijing who actually fight, this is across the board, right? Bagua, PaoChui, Xingyi, all of it. They don't block point to point. They block with big swaths of movements. They see something coming in, and there's a roll that comes over. It's not this big, Pete Townsend playing guitar roll, but it's enough of a roll that they cover the whole range of all the targets the person might want to hit. And so from here to here, each block is going to roll through and find power as you then come back in towards the center. Does that make sense? As we're training here is how to draw these blocks, these kind of parrying movements into our base. So instead of just tapping their arm, we draw the whole person in and pull through. Those of you who have pushed around in class know what it feels like when you get that whole hip roll in behind the draw through, right? So you feel compelled to move towards the ground. And that's the idea. If you make contact, you want to be a contact that actually, leaves an impression. Make sense? Awesome. Quick sip of water. They're going to put these three things together on a line, okay? Good, Joanna. All right, so watching me as I roll, the foot rolls in. And again, this step, let's do just the footwork first, externally rotating. Now, this next step looks like I'm closing and collapsing, but I'm not. It's an external roll to here. And remember, for the external roll, I turn in before I turn out, right? This is the turn in, that's the turn out. And so it really is just both lobes of an external rotation with a step in between. For those of you who did Tai Chi with me last night, it's kind of an analog to that roll, lift, and using that lift to carry the foot back, right? You have the external rotation, rolling out, the turn in pulls the leg across, the turn out powers that final strike. Let's try the stepping first, just twice each side. We'll stack the arms on top of it. So it would be all of your left leg in front, return that left foot in, that left hip in rather, that left hip pulls the foot, that left hip pulls the foot. From there, we're going to pull that right hip in, that pull in draws the foot in here, that hip turns in, and as that hip turns out, there's our final strike. Okay? So once again, that lead left hip turns in, pulling the foot up. As we arc out, we step. As we pull in that leg, it turns the back right hip in. That hip arcs in and then rolls out. Good. Once more on this side, then we'll do the other. Left hip turns in, pulling the foot. Left hip turns out with a step. Right hip turns in, forming the shape of the step. Right hip continues to turn out, and there's our throw. Very nice. Other side. So now it's your right hip that we're starting with. The right hip turns in, pulling the foot. Right hip turns out. There's our step. Left hip turns in. That guides that left leg as it steps. Continuing that arc in, that left hip turns out. There's our throw. Twice more on that side, then we'll add arms. Right hip turns in, step. Turns out, step. Left hip turns in, step, continues to roll to out. Once more. Right hip turns in, pulls the leg. Right hip turns out to step. Left hip turns in, pulls the leg. Left hip turns out, throw. Should we stack some arms on that?
That feels super awkward.
At first, right? What part of your body feels really awkward?
I mean, especially the internal rotation on the back leg, like
Yeah.
it just doesn't quite make sense for how that moves the leg. I don't know.
Watching me, so again, that turn, so is this part okay?
Yeah.
That makes good sense?
Yeah,
The weird part?
yeah,
Yeah, okay. And so that makes perfect sense. If I do it from standing, just focus on the leg, as my lead hip turns out, and imagine this is that first turn of that step, I'm using this turn in to guide the step through.
and then is there a twist in that standing knee as you're doing that?
After I step, I can, so from here, so sorry, it's hard to, yes, a very slight one. So again, as I come through turning out, there's the step in, and then as I bring the weight, as you can see, into that front leg, that back knee can turn out to relax and take pressure off of it.
It actually is kind of helpful the way you're breaking it down, because for me, my natural impulse during Pichuan is to like have that second step be more closing in the hips,
Right.
but it's more sophisticated than that. Like there's a different weighting than like just the circle walking kobu. That dako is like a lot wider, so that swivel in the hip.
And the swivel creates more of like, for lack of a better analogy, like you have an exercise ball or a thigh master, and you're squeezing that in, and that creates the elasticity for the final strike. And so instead of just collapsing in, you're squeezing to pop. Right? And the figure eight gives you kind of the range of motion to make that a squeeze, and not just a drop of the legs together. Let's try it with the hands, and when Karen comes back, let's make a bit more of this. So watching that front hand, that left hand, as I turn in, stepping out. And now from here, there's that turn of that back hip. So Karen, as I step out, notice how my front foot isn't straight ahead, it's off the side. If I orient towards the side of the camera, it's not here, it's here. You see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
now gives me the latitude as I pull through. Now as I step, see how my feet are both parallel?
Mm-hmm.
Not turned straight in, but slightly angled forward. That again gives my knee the space to adjust and draw through without taking undue pressure on the joint.
Okay.
The part that's really throwing you off is actually the very end of that first step. So instead of going straight along the floorboards, turn out from the floorboards just a little.
Yeah, I am trying to turn out. I do see that part of it. I think it's just like that it's kind of awkward to like get enough weight onto that front foot to feel the internal rotation and draw that back foot forward.
So if you watch me, see that roll, see this roll here?
Yeah.
That roll is paired with this part of the strike. And
Oh, okay. That's gonna help pull you.
Roll. This hip begins to come back in, and as it transfers over, pulls the other hip in, and then draws around and through.
Well, that's a good point. Like once we have the arms on it, the arms will actually help pull us forward.
Just a little. And it's this really tricky point on the change of weightedness, that back leg, that front leg, with that curve. It's a hard point to peel at first. So let's work with the arms and backtrack that hip movement in just a second.
Okay.
Awesome. So that left hand lead, turning the hip, foot draws in, step out. Now that front leg continues to externally rotate, and see as it rolls back, it begins to pull that back right hip in. Does everyone feel that a little bit? Step with that pull, there's your slice. And as you slice, that front right hip is now turned in. As that hip turns out, there's your throw. Good. Let's try the same side one more time. Hip leads, foot and arm follow. Hip leads, step out. The hip rolls out, and as it does, it pulls that right hip in, stepping around, closing with that right hip, and that close is pulling that right hip in. Does everyone see that? And then as it rolls to out, pop, there's the hit.
Whoa, I just felt it.
Good, good. So do it twice more. All right, everyone else try at your own pace. Good, Craig, make sure it's predicated on that rotation in the hip. There you go, Joanna. Awesome, Joanna. So the part that's a little skipping there is how you get that second foot to step, right? That's a tricky thing. And so if I lead from my knee and step through here, I get that kind of more lumbering movement. If I imagine there's a line from that inguinal, a line from that hip pulling me across, right? You even kind of like you're pulling that string across your body, and then let that foot follow that string. That's more akin to the step. Yeah, there's that step you want. You want to move from your hip with your legs, with your knees just kind of following. Good. And so again, the hip leads. The hip leads. The hip leads. There you go. Much better, Joanna. Much, much better. Let's see. Is Kara's frame? No, there's Kara. Good. Good, Kara. And take your time. So you're going from big move to big move. Smooth it out from your base. Watching me. The hip turns in. The hip turns out. The other hip turns in. The other hip turns out. Rest the arms on a smooth movement from that center. Okay? There you go, Caro. Very nice. Keep playing with that. And Chris. Good, Chris. That's looking solid, man. Very nice.
I've been thinking about that last move as like having a heavy weight.
Yeah.
And move center.
Yeah. Because ideally, there's a heavy weight. There's a bigger, stronger person coming at you. And you have to use this movement to get through them, right? If you're not coming from your center, they're going to overpower your upper body, right? You have to get under their base with your base to take over their spine.
But yeah, it is like great breakthrough. It's like I can actually feel it in my stomach, like that.
Good.
Cool.
And that is the key to Dragon Stirs Earth. Get it into your belly and then change the shape to whatever shape you want. Once it hits your stomach, you can fly with it. And
you know, like me being with you in the school for 6 years, it's still like this classic move is still like a mind fuck.
It is for me too. Like I discover new things about this all the time that I wonder how I didn't. You train and you just find new angles, and it makes more sense.
Well, those of us that are just starting now are lucky because we're getting you as a more advanced teacher than 6 years ago, so we don't have to struggle through like your understanding 6 years ago.
Someday, if I get drunk enough, I will show you all a clip show of my evolution over the last 10 years of training in China, and it's a testament to what hard work can do. That was not very good.
We could probably make a video and then put it in a Dropbox, and then we could all have a drink at home.
Oh no, I will full on find the courage post on YouTube because it's gonna be funny.
Okay.
It's gonna be funny.
I'm saying we could totally do it now.
But intoxication is necessary.
Or roll a battery powder projector into a field and come out.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Good. This is looking good for right now. Everyone shake this out for a second. We're gonna do our kicks in just a moment here, okay, to finish up. And we'll play with this a little more next week to kind of capstone it in the morning classes. And then Chris, we'll get back to our essential Qigongs. Just we started this last Tuesday, and I want to make sure we gave it enough, work to actually, make a new level of sense. Otherwise, you're just kind of treading water. And I think everyone made some good leaps today.
Makes sense to me.
Cool. And again, if it's still confusing, don't worry. Play with the parts that work for you. Play with the idea of the hip leading the hand. Work on it stationary. And then if the first two steps are easier than third, drill those. And occasionally bring in the third step and make sure that even if there's a part that isn't working for you, play with the parts that are working. Right? Find the answers in those that can guide you to that next piece.
And it's like, I'm glad I brought it up because it's just been like, months upon months upon months, and even maybe more like years where it's like, Joey can do it this way. Joey can do that. I can see that he's doing it this way. It's like, man, like, how the fuck is he doing that?
And again, if I go fast, I'm going with my knee. You see how it's very clumsy, right?
Yeah.
But if I get that roll from my base,
Yep.
I'm pulling the floor with me on each step and just drawing through that partner.
Yep.
And there's such a benefit to moving that way. Let's do our slow kicks, then our wall kicks. And if anyone wants a few quick minutes of story time of the battle days, I'm happy to give that. Okay, so with the foot back, pulling up on the toes of the back foot, the front foot opens just a little, and a slight opening in my hip, lifting the toes up, stepping across my base. Just my toes touch first. As I drill into that leg, the back leg lifts, and see how I use that same pivot, that same roll, all the way through to extension. I feel that stretch to the top of my glute, pulling from the inside of the hip around to settling back on the ground. Good. Front foot turns out, toe turns up, lifting, pulling into that front leg, continue that drill, back foot raises, turn, 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 press, and as you press, push through the heel until you feel that stretch right on the top of that glute, pulling from the inside, the front of your hip, from that inguinal, as you pull around to step back. Two more, one more each side. Front foot turns out, toes lift from the back foot, step. Toe touches first, drill. Follow that movement through. Twist to press, pushing out through your heel, stretch, raising the leg as you press, drawing from the hip as we come around, and back, lastest one, hip turns out, toe raises, step, pull, drill, push the heel, pulling from that inguinal. Good, let's find our walls. The leg back, forward, down, up, back. Forward, down, up, 2. Forward, down, up, 3. Forward, down, up, 4. Forward, down, up, and 5 little raises. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and around. Good. Other leg, same thing. Back, forward, down, up, 1. Forward, down, up, 2. Back, forward, down, up, 3. Back, forward, down, up, 4. Back, forward, down, up, and 5 little raises. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and back. Good, and shake it out. Very well done, everyone. Any questions? Okay, so if you want to hear the story of my very first trip to China in abbreviation, I'm happy to give that next.
Sure.
Yeah? Cool. So I started going to China in April of 2013. I had spent over 10 years before working as a student of a master in LA named John Bracey. He ran a bit of a cultish studio and was more than a little bit of a bastard. Severe power games to the students. He refused to lineage his black students because they were people of color. Like all kinds of shit that I found out once I was too invested into it and kind of stuck in that whole sunk loss fallacy to easily extract myself. And so I fell into a less than savory thing working with him. the reason why I started is because I've been training since I was 6 years old, and no one had ever hit me as hard as he hit. Like, he had some of that connection that you get from Fa Li, you know, and the work in Beijing. But I found out later he'd only spent about 3 months there. But he'd written a book about it and built a whole career off of being the first American to take the stuff, you know, back from China, right? So he had this whole mythos about him, and I was a kid. I was, you know, 18 when I started training with him, and here was a dude who could do stuff I'd never seen before. I fell in. I kind of stepped away as the years went by because he and I had repeated issues. You guys all know Ian Johnson, the student we train with?
Yeah.
When I was at the height of my fighting and Ian was 15, Bracy wanted to set up a thing where he was going to flex his nuts over Ian and Ian's teacher and have me beat Ian up. And I just walked out of the building and refused. And Ian and I have been friends ever since. He's been kind of like a little brother ever since that day. And so, like, it was a whole lot of really just, it was a messy, terrible situation. But through him, I made contact with one of the dudes who he trained with over in China, who invited me over to Beijing if I ever, you know, found my way over there. I don't think he expected me ever to go, but, you know, 3 months later, I was on a plane. And I ended up in Tiantan, the Temple of Heaven. We walked across the Square Mile Park and met this gentleman named Lin Jie and the master I was to work with, Lu Mengen. And Master Lu had both Kate and I demonstrate our most advanced Bagua, so he kind of, you know, grade where we were before our training started. And after we both went, Lu stopped, got real quiet, and mumbled to Lin Jie. And then Lin Jie said, "You do not recognize anything you're doing as our martial art." And so after 10 years of work, and like, you know, you guys all see how I work. Like, I didn't work any less back then. You know, I put myself into this, right? And I had a school in Portland at this time. You know, I'd already started teaching in the parks. And had a, you know, like Derek was already there. There are a couple of the old timers who were still left. And after that first meeting, we walked across the temple, and I had to really consider, you know, do I go home and continue teaching this completely fabricated curriculum, or do I abandon 10 years of work and start over? And there were a few tears and a couple of drinks, but we decided, you know, pretty quickly that the only right thing to do was to actually learn Gong Fu. And so the whole school got reinvented in 2013. And since then, you know, up until COVID and my illness, I was out there, you know, twice a year, 2 months a year at least. And I hope to get back to that once things clear up, just working 8 to 10 hour days, trying to build up, you know, an actual understanding of this stuff. And so when all of you see the things that I do and the complexity of it, you also understand that I've only been working on this stuff in this way for about 7 years. You know, I'm not an old hand at this. I've been doing martial arts for over 30 years, but the technology in this stuff is very, very different, even, you know, from other very sophisticated styles, you know, like Capoeira, which is very challenging, very sophisticated, but in a very different way. The internal mechanic work, it can come fairly rapidly if you do a dedicated practice. And you don't need to be psychotic like me. If you put in just, you know, half an hour, 3 times a week of your own study, you'll go far, right? If you find a thing that you really love and make a dedicated practice out of that for 6 months for half an hour a day, 3 times a week, just that one thing, that'll become a cornerstone of the rest of your practice because you'll actually begin to understand it. And so the key to this work is picking an idea, dissecting it, making your own, and then constantly re-examining it. Because what's right today, what is perfect today, if you're at the height of your game, will not be perfect tomorrow because you'll have changed just that little bit. And so there's this constant work, constant growth. And again, I'm only at these technologies for 7 years. You know, that's a manageable time frame for all of us, right? So yeah, that's how I started with this stuff. That's how I got into the position I'm in. And then, you know, through hard work, other teachers came out of the woodwork. I went from being an annoyance and a curiosity to actually a student of the temple. You know, at this point, I actually teach the beginners when I'm out there because I'm the most advanced student of a few of my teachers, because unlike a lot of the people who live out there, I actually train every day. You know, so again, you don't need to be Chinese or live in China. You just need hard work and decent direction, and it'll carry you pretty far. All right. Any questions?
Man, that must have been a gut punch when you got that feedback.
It was a huge gut punch, and that became a huge relief because I never had to tolerate Bracy ever again.
Yeah, perfect.
And again, I look back at myself back then and I wonder, like, is a lot of people who fall in those sort of situations, you know, how did I let myself do this? Like, I'm not a follower, you know, I'm not a person who jumps in line of, you know, crap over and over again. But I wanted the good stuff. I wanted to learn. And this guy presented, you know, ancient Chinese secrets, and I was young, and they looked like it. You know, they were, again, after 20 years of training, unlike anything I'd ever seen. And, or sorry, I was 18, sorry, after, you know, 15 years of training, like anything I'd ever seen. And I fell for it, which is part of why everything I do here is so open. You know, if I don't know an answer, I tell you I don't know. I eliminate chi from the conversation because magical thinking takes the power away from all of you. if you experience chi and energy, rad, more power to you, enjoy it. You can do that stuff for that too, but the mechanics, the bare bones of it should all be a thing that can intellectually break down and share, and not a magic owned by one person or one teacher. Yeah.
I think the response that you're saying that can also be echoed by Alan Watts, where he says when supernatural things happen, if you have a daily internal practice, hang up the phone because it distracts you from what really needs to be done.
Exactly.
And you've told me that directly before, but like so many different modalities say the same thing. I mean, like in Buddhism, the same sort of reaction, like when you're doing like the daily work of internally working on yourself, like those things they happen, right. But it's more of like an easy route where people can create that power dynamic and claim that they have a monopoly to something that's mysterious and unknowable. And that's not fair because we all have our innate abilities to do something. And right now it's to download this very significant part of culture.
Right. And all of you perfectly being you will be, your own kind of beautiful. And that's the goal of the Gong Fu, to bring out that part of you, not to mimic me. And
you mean this lovely mug?
That lovely mug right there. like the joy is to use this to strip away the layers and be the most authentic part of yourself. And that's individual. That is the personal practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I'm glad that you went through your own personal story, Joey, because people in your position put themselves so far on a pedestal and, have this mythos of themselves. And even in lesser layers, it seems like almost everyone's creating this myth of who they are. And really Zhenren, being authentic is really important. And you can't fake sincerity.
Right. We all want to be the hero of our own stories, but you have to, see the mistakes too.
What was that?
We all want to be the hero of our own stories, but you have to, draw from mistakes.
Oh, draw from mistakes, yeah. Yeah, and really when it comes to being able to teach something, I think that sometimes if people are naturals at it, it doesn't actually lend itself to being a good teacher. It actually helps if somebody has struggled quite a bit.
Yeah.
Hey, you.
And I find that's true for the same with senior students like Aaron and Derek. I listen to them very intently because they tell me oh, this really sucked. And it sucks. Mm-hmm. So don't do that.
Right. And Derek, he says in class 4, so I don't mind repeating, he was crippled as a child. He had to have cardiac surgery when he was just a week old. Just massive issues. His aorta wrapped around his heart the wrong way. And one leg is shorter than the other, chronic weaknesses and pain. And after 7 years of training, he looks positively robust.
Yeah, and even before COVID, I saw him kicking that heavy bag. Man, he's starting to get even stronger too, which was even more impressive.
Yeah. You can never get back to that perfect form as if you didn't have that injury, but you can make really substantial gains and definitely cover more ground. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thanks for being the guinea pig, Joey.
It's great seeing all of you. I should go run this one a little bit. She is in need of some data time. It's so good seeing you all.
Thanks for sharing.
Girl, maybe I'll see you tomorrow.
I am wearing the new Flying Tortoise shirt.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so we'll have the park on Saturday. All right.
Great.
Oh, it is. Okay, park is on for Saturday.
The park is on for Saturday. We all tested negative for COVID, and I have been symptom-free for several days now.
Right on. Okay, cool. I'll try to make it. Bye, guys. Bye, friends.
I ordered a Flying Tortoise mask too.
They're being reordered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Cool.
All right. Well, Joey.
Bye.
Thank you.
If you want to come through on Friday.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome, then. Happy birthday, Carol. We'll see you soon.
Birthday, Carol.